Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel back to one of the most inconvenient, uncomfortable, and downright miserable places in history, the life of a medieval peasant. And not just any medieval peasant, you. You're going to be born into a world where nothing is soft, nothing is fair, and everything is out to make your life harder than you thought possible. The floor is dirt. The air smells like smoke and sweat. Your teeth are already a disaster, and it's not even breakfast time yet. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born in the middle of the night, screaming into a hut, lit only by a smoking tallow candle and the pale moonlight through a cracked wooden shutter. The floor beneath you is packed dirt, cold, uneven, streaked with soot and the remains of yesterday's stew. You don't know it yet, but this is the most comfort you're likely to get. Your mother is exhausted. This is her fifth child. She's maybe 23. She looks older. Her hands are cracked and her hair is already streaked with gray. The midwife, a neighbor with more superstition than skill, wraps you in a ragged cloth and lays you beside the hearth. There's no crib, no ceremony, no celebration. Just the reality of another mouth to feed. You won't be named for several days. That's because there's a decent chance you won't survive the week. 1 in 4 newborns won't make it through the first month. The priest won't come unless you seem likely to live. Until then, you're just the baby. If you die, they'll bury you outside the graveyard fence, unbaptized, unrecorded. If you make it, you'll grow quickly, and you'll need to. Childhood doesn't last long here. By age 5, you'll be feeding chickens and chasing goats. By age 7, you'll know how to sweep the cottage, carry firewood, collect water from the well, and probably trap rats in the cellar. You'll be covered in bruises, scratches, and calluses. There are no shoes. Your feet toughen against thorns and frost. You cry the first few times you step into the icy river to wash clothes. After that, you just grit your teeth. The cottage is shared with 6 others, your parents, your siblings, and maybe an aging grandparent who mutters prayers and smells of herbs and damp wool. You all sleep on a communal mat of straw, crawling with fleas and the occasional mouse. If it rains, the roof leaks. If it snows, the wind slips in through the gaps in the timber. There's always smoke from the hearth curling up to the low ceiling, blackening the beams. You breathe it in from your first day until your last. You cough often. You always will. Food is basic. Gruel mostly. Thick porridge made of oats water and the occasional turnip, sometimes cabbage. If you're lucky, there's a boiled egg once a week. Salted pork if your family owns a pig and is willing to slaughter it in winter. Bread, coarse and heavy, full of ground-up husks and bits of grit from the millstones. Your teeth will wear down early. You'll lose a few before your 12th birthday. You'll learn the rhythm of the year early on. The planting season in spring, the harvest in autumn. The brutal silence of winter when meals grow smaller and the fires burn low. You'll remember the winter your mother cried because the barley ran out and your younger brother begged for milk that didn't exist. You'll remember how cold it got, how the blanket wasn't enough, how the rats grew bold and the wind crept in like a thief. There's no school for you, not unless the Lord is unusually generous and you live near a monastery. Even then, it's mostly the sons of landowners who learn their letters. You learn what you need, how to carry, how to kneel, how to obey. Your father teaches you when to plant and when to reap. Your mother teaches you how to knead bread and skin a rabbit. They teach you not with books, but with hands, rough, scarred hands that guide yours. You learn not to speak unless spoken to bow your head when the reeve passes, to curtsy for the steward, to cross yourself when you hear the church bell, even if you don't know what hour it's marking. You learn to live in the cracks of other people's lives, to move quietly, to serve, to endure. You learn the difference between your life and the life of the Lord's Son. He rides past on a pony, his boots shining, his coat trimmed in fur. He doesn't look at you. He never will. You exist outside his world, like the chickens or the weeds in the field. You watch him from the corner of your eye, and you wonder what it's like to eat meat every day, to sleep on wool, to know that your shoes will be replaced when they wear out. By 10, you're working full days. If you're a boy, you follow your father into the fields, plowing, sowing, harvesting, lifting, bending. Your spine begins to curve early. Your hands bleed. You wake before dawn and collapse after dusk. If you're a girl, you follow your mother. Cooking, spinning, sweeping, hauling. You fetch water again and again, bucket after heavy bucket. You learn to care for babies, to mend clothes, to bind wounds. You also learn fear. Fear of the Lord's taxes. Fear of wolves in the woods. Fear of disease. Fear of fire. Fear of childbirth, yes, even at 10, because you've heard the screams and you've seen the blood. You've seen your cousin's mother vanish behind a door and never come out again. You learn early that life is short and death is always close. No one talks about fairness. No one asks if it should be this way. It just is. And for you, born a peasant in the medieval world, it always will be. The day begins before the sun even touches the edge of the horizon. You're awake because the chickens are already squawking and your father's boots thump across the floorboards above the hard-packed earth. You stretch beneath the coarse blanket, trying not to shiver. The fire burned out hours ago, and the hearth is just a pile of ash and half-charred wood. Your mother is already up, too. You can hear her stirring the pot, scraping the last of the previous night's barley gruel from the sides, so it doesn't go to waste. The first meal of the day is the same as every day, more gruel. You chew it slowly, trying not to crunch the tiny bits of grit from the mill. They wear down your teeth like sandpaper, but you're used to it. You've learned to swallow without biting when you can. No one speaks much during breakfast. There's too much to do. Outside, the frost still lingers on the grass, crisp and white in the early morning gloom. The sky is colorless and the air smells of dung and smoke. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your skin. You carry that scent everywhere and you don't notice it anymore. No one does. Your chores start immediately. You help your father mend a broken fence where the goats tried to push through. The wood is splintered and your fingers are already raw from yesterday's work. You fetch stones to wedge at the base and hold the line steady. When you lift them, worms scatter and the cold bites at your wrists. But you don't stop. No one ever does. After the fence, you head to the field. It's planting season again, which means hours of bent backs and blistered palms. You drag a heavy sack of seed behind you, while your father shows you how to cast them in even handfuls. You've done this before, but he watches you all the same, making sure you don't waste any. Seed is precious. A careless toss is the difference between enough bread in winter and going hungry. The soil is damp and sticky. It clings to your shoes, weighs down your legs, makes every step harder than the one before. The sun climbs slowly, giving no warmth. Your tunic sticks to your back with sweat and damp. By mid-morning, your hands are covered in mud, your arms sore, your knees aching. There's no stopping, no break. You work until the bell from the church calls noon. That bell, dull and distant, is the one mercy of the day. Not because it signals rest, but because it marks time. In a life where days blur into each other, the sound becomes your clock, your calendar, your tether to the rhythm of the world. You trudge back to the cottage for the midday meal, more porridge now cold, and a sliver of cheese that smells stronger than it tastes. The baby is crying. Your sister is washing clothes in a bucket near the fire, and your mother looks more tired than she did this morning. You chew slowly, watching her work while you eat. There's no such thing as a full stomach, just degrees of hunger. In the afternoon, you collect firewood. You walk the edge of the forest, looking for fallen branches, never daring to step too far in. The trees are dark and dense, and stories linger there of wolves and bandits and worse. You don't believe all of them, but you still glance over your shoulder as you gather the branches into a bundle, tying them with a strip of twisted flax and slinging them over your back. By the time you return, the sun has begun its slow descent, bathing the muddy village in dull gold. The cottage windows catch the light, but not the warmth. You stack the wood near the hearth and kneel to clean the soot from your tunic. You're not done. There's spinning to do. Your mother hands you the spindle and flax. She shows you again how to twist it right, how to keep the tension even. The thread breaks twice before you get it right. You mutter under your breath, but she only nods. You'll get better. You have to. The village needs wool and linen. Everyone needs something they can trade. As you spin, your little brother tries to crawl into your lap. You hush him gently, trying to keep the spindle steady. The thread tangles. You sigh. Start again. Outside, someone is shouting. A man cursing at a donkey that refuses to move. Somewhere else, a dog barks. A child cries. These are the sounds of your world, the constant rough music of survival. Supper is thin stew with carrots and leeks. Your father says nothing as he eats, neither do you. The silence is not uncomfortable. It's just what life is. After your mother sharpens the knives while your sister mends a tear in a tunic, you sweep the floor, pushing the ash and crumbs into the corner where the chickens will peck at it tomorrow. There is no candle for the night. You've only enough tallow for holy days. Instead, the fire gives its last flickers of light as you all settle down. You lie close to your siblings on the straw, pulling the scratchy blanket over your legs. Fleas jump beneath the layers, but you've stopped scratching. It doesn't help. As your eyes close, you hear your father mutter a short prayer. You don't know all the words, but you know what it means. Let the harvest come. Let the livestock live. Let the tax be low. Let the baby survive. You fall asleep to that quiet plea woven into the fire's crackle and your sister's soft breathing. And when you wake tomorrow, it will begin again. No choices, no change, just the same weight, the same dirt, the same aching arms. This is your life, and you were born into it without asking. The rooster crows before the sky lightens, and your eyes snap open, not from the sound, but from the habit. Your body knows what time it is without being told. You lie still for a moment, your breath forming small clouds in the morning chill. The fire is dead, the hearth cold. The blankets are bunched around your feet, rough and damp with dew that crept in during the night. You shift and a flea jumps from your sleeve to your cheek. Your sister is still asleep, curled in a knot beside you. The baby is fussing near your mother's sit-phone side. Your father is already gone. You heard the door open in the dark, the creak of boots on frozen mud. You sit up and stretch, feeling every sore muscle, every stiff joint. You are 11 years old. You feel 60. You dress quickly, pulling your tunic over your shift, tying it tight at the waist with a cord. It's your only tunic. You washed it last week in the river, and it still smells faintly of algae and smoke. You wish it was warmer. You wish it was thicker. But wishes are useless. You go to the corner where your shoes should be, find them stiff and misshapen from yesterday's soaking. You press your feet in anyway, wincing. Your mother gives you a crust of barley bread before sending you out. It's hard and dry, the edges sharp enough to scratch your gums. You chew slowly as you walk eyes down, feet dragging. The path to the field is frozen over. Ruts from the cart have filled with icy water. You step carefully, balancing your bundle of tools on your shoulder. The spade is heavier than you remember. You don't complain. The field stretches out before you like a graveyard, muddy, uneven, cold. Your father is already at work, turning the soil with rhythmic grunts. You fall into step beside him, and he hands you a hoe. Together you begin breaking up the frost-hardened clumps of earth. You don't speak. The work doesn't allow for it. The only sound is the scrape of metal, the breath of beasts, and the groan of tired limbs. Hours pass. The sun rises, but it does little more than cast a weak light across the trees. A crow watches from a crooked post. You wonder what it sees. You wonder if it understands this life, the scraping, the bending, the aching that never really goes away. At midday, you take your break near the hedgerow. You sit on a rock and eat your second meal, a thin slice of cheese and a handful of dried peas. They crunch between your teeth. You savor the salt even as it burns the cracks on your lips. Your father hands you a strip of jerky. You take it without a word and tear into it like an animal. This is your reward for hours of labor, a meal that would make a nobleman gag, and a few moments of rest before the earth calls you back. The afternoon is worse. The wind picks up, slipping through every seam in your tunic. Your hands turn red, then blue, then numb. You switch tools with your father so he can finish digging the trench, while you clear debris from the far edge of the plot. There's a tree root in the way, tangled deep in the soil. You kneel beside it, digging with your fingers, chipping at it with a rock. It doesn't move. Eventually your father comes and hacks it loose with the axe. He mutters about wasting time. You nod and return to clearing stones, ashamed that you couldn't manage it alone. By the time the sun begins to fall, your body is sagging under its own weight. You've been standing, walking, bending, lifting for so long that the thought of stopping feels unnatural. You trudge back to the cottage with your father dragging the tools behind you, hands coated in dirt and dried blood. At home, your mother is boiling nettles for soup. The smell is bitter, but it fills the room, and your stomach tightens in anticipation. Your sister is spinning wool, her fingers working the spindle slowly, carefully. The baby is asleep on a folded cloth. Your older brother is carving a spoon out of wood near the hearth. You wash your hands in the cold water basin and sit near the fire. Your legs are trembling. You stretch them out slowly, your knees popping like dry twigs. Supper is nettle soup with a piece of bread soaked in the broth to soften it. There is no meat tonight. There won't be any for several nights. Your father mutters about the pig losing weight, about the goat refusing to eat. He's worried. You can hear it in his voice, though he tries to hide it. After the meal, you help your mother grind grain. The mortar is old, the pestle heavy. You take turns pushing, turning, grinding, until your shoulders ache. The sound is dull and rhythmic. Your eyes begin to droop, but you keep going. There's no stopping until the bowl is full. When the fire dies down, you lie on the straw mat, arms curled around your stomach, legs tucked to your chest. The wind rattles the shutters. You hear an owl hoot in the trees. You whisper a prayer not to live forever, not even to be happy, but just to wake up tomorrow and not be sick. Illness is always waiting. One cough, one bad turn of the stomach, and everything can fall apart. You saw it happen to the neighbor's boy last winter. He was laughing on Monday and buried by Friday. The priest said he died with the Lord's name on his lips. But you remember the screaming. You remember the blood. You fall asleep thinking of that blood of frozen fields of roots too deep to pull and stones too heavy to lift. You dream of bread, of honey, of shoes that fit. But when the rooster crows again, you'll wake into the same world. You were born into it, and there's no way out. The dream fades before the sun even rises. You were running in that dream barefoot through a field of golden grain. The wind was warm and your hands were full of honey cakes. But now your hands are empty, your body cold, and the straw beneath you is damp again. The scent of old sweat and smoke stings your nose, and your sister's elbow is digging into your side. You shift slowly, pulling the threadbare blanket back over your shoulders. It doesn't help much, but it's something. Your mother is already up. You can hear the scrape of the pot, the soft clatter of spoons, and the muffled hum of a hymn under her breath. She always sings when she's tired or worried. That sound, low and familiar, weaves its way into your bones. You sit up, stretch your aching limbs, and blink at the dim glow of the rekindled fire. It casts flickering shadows against the wall. Your breath forms a ghost in the air. The morning meal is already waiting, the same thin pottage stretched again, with water and a few pinches of yesterday's flour. Your father eats first, saying little, then heads out. He doesn't need to tell you what you'll be doing today. You already know. It's the same as yesterday, and the day before, and the season before that. Today it's dung spreading. You hate dung spreading. The stench clings to you thick and sour, and no amount of scrubbing ever seems to wash it out. But the fields must be fed if they are to feed you, and so you gather the spade, the worn leather bucket, and a strip of cloth to cover your mouth. It barely helps. The village is already alive with the smell, every yard, every fence, every barn steaming with the refuse of winter. The animals, too, are restless. You can hear the pigs grunting and the cows lowing in their stalls. You work alongside your brothers, lifting and flinging the muck with rhythm. The motion is punishing. Your arms grow heavy, your back stiff, your nose burns. But no one stops. To stop is to fall behind. To fall behind is to starve later. There is no reward for pacing yourself. You pause only once when your stomach begins to churn. Not from the smell, but from the pang of hunger that still hasn't gone away since yesterday. You chew a strip of dried beetroot and swallow it dry. It's bitter and stringy, but it's enough to quiet the noise in your gut. By mid-morning, the sun climbs a little higher. The snow has melted completely now, leaving behind sludge and soft, treacherous earth. Your boots are soaked. The blisters on your heels burst open, but you keep going. You always keep going. The reeve passes by with his crooked cane and disapproving eyes. You bow your head slightly, not too much, just enough. His gaze lingers. He says nothing. But tomorrow he may report you to the steward for moving too slowly, or for something you didn't do. You've seen it happen before. You return to the cottage for a break that barely counts as rest. Your mother wipes your face with a cloth soaked in vinegar water, then rubs pig fat into the raw spots on your hands. The sting makes you flinch. She says nothing. Her own hands are worse. She tells you to fetch water from the well. You know the path well. It winds through the middle of the village past the chapel, and the blacksmith past the baker's house and the communal oven. The smell of yeast lingers in the air. You wish you had something to trade. The baker's daughter is inside kneading dough with her plump white arms. She never looks up when you pass. You're invisible to her. At the well, the pulley creaks as you lower the bucket. The water comes up icy cold, splashing your feet. You hoist it over your shoulder and begin the walk back, careful not to spill. Your fingers ache with the strain. You pass another peasant boy doing the same. He nods. You nod back. Nothing is said. You understand each other without words. In the afternoon, you are sent to gather kindling. The woods are not far, but you still move cautiously. The trees are still bare, thin fingers reaching toward the gray sky. You know the stories, travelers who disappeared, wolves that follow, silently bandits who wait for boys like you. You don't believe all of it, but you believe enough to stay close to the path. You find branches, old dry ones, and lash them together with twine. You gather bark and twigs. You know which ones burn hottest, which smoke too much, which spark dangerously. These are lessons no one teaches formally, but you pick them up or suffer the consequences. You drag the bundle home and drop it near the door. Another task complete. Another bruise forming under your sleeve. That evening, you help your mother knead the week's dough. She pours what little flour remains into a bowl and adds water, salt, and crushed herbs. You stir with aching arms, then shape the loaves as best you can. The dough is dense. It smells sour. She'll take them to the communal oven in the morning and hope they rise. Supper is lentils and greens boiled to mush. Your sister spoons it carefully into bowls while the baby wails. Your father returns late, covered in mud. He eats without a word, gulps down a mug of watered ale, then collapses near the fire. After dinner, you sit beside your sister and mend a ripped seam in your tunic. The needle is bent, the thread frayed, but you work patiently. She hums a tune your mother once sang when you were small. You barely remember the words. The fire crackles softly. The wind outside has calmed. Your mother kisses the baby's forehead and lays her down gently in the basket. You and your siblings lie back on the straw, wrapping yourselves tightly together for warmth. Your father snores. Your mother prays softly. And you stare up at the beams of the ceiling. You think of what it means to be born like this, to have a life pre-written in mud and grain and aching limbs, to know that tomorrow will ask the same of you again and again, to understand that no one is coming to save you. This is your place, not because you earned it, but because you were born. The morning is already halfway through its gray silence by the time you're on your knees outside the cottage, scrubbing the inside of a cracked wooden pail with handfuls of wet moss and cold ash. Your fingers are red and stinging. The water is near freezing, and the ash sticks to your skin, leaving black smears under your nails. You're not alone. Your sister is a few steps away, cleaning soot off the cooking pot with a bone-handled scraper. Neither of you speak. The silence isn't awkward. It's normal. You work until the task is done, and only then do you speak if there's anything left to say. Today is cleaning day, not by choice. The steward is coming to inspect the cottages. He won't come inside unless he suspects something's wrong, but your mother insists that everything must be spotless anyway. A poor cottage is expected. A dirty one is punished. That's the way of things. Appearances are the only defense peasants like you have against punishment you can't afford. You gather straw from the pile behind the barn, shaking out the bugs and dung clinging to it, before layering it across the floor of the cottage to soak up the filth from the past week. You sweep it out with a bundled switch of reeds, dragging clumps of ash and dust toward the door. The straw is old and breaking apart. You do your best, but you know it won't be good enough. Your mother will redo it before the steward arrives. While she kneels in the corner, scrubbing the hearthstones with a rag soaked in vinegar, you head outside to patch the henhouse roof. A storm earlier in the week tore loose a few bundles of thatch, and the hens have been damp and noisy ever since. You balance on the wooden slats, knees pressed against wet beams, hands full of slippery reed and rope. It takes longer than you expected, and your fingers are raw by the time you climb down. The chickens scatter when you land, pecking at the ground. You toss them a few stale crumbs and hope they lay today. Your family needs those eggs. You check the nests, one warm egg, two empty shells, and a crushed yolk. You sigh, pick out the ruined straw, and remind yourself not to complain. One egg is better than none. Back inside, the smell of boiling onions fills the cottage. Your mother's making pottage again. You don't ask what's in it. You don't want to know. She stirs it with a long-handled spoon while bouncing the baby on her hip. You take over the stirring so she can sit down. Her ankles are swollen and her eyes are ringed with purple. She mutters that the steward should break a toe on the threshold. You almost laugh, almost. The boys come back from the fields around midday. Their tunics are wet to the knees and their faces are caked with dirt. They stomp into the cottage, shivering and sore. Your mother scolds them for tracking in mud, but her voice is weak. She hands them bowls of stew, and they huddle near the fire to eat. You get the last bowl. The thin broth barely covers the lentils at the bottom. You sip it carefully, not because it's hot, but because you want it to last. Every bite is something your body remembers. Your stomach tightens with hunger, but you hold back. There's no more until morning. In the afternoon, the steward arrives. You hear his voice before you see him, sharp, nasal, arrogant. He speaks to the reeve as though the man were deaf and stupid. Your mother shoves the baby into your arms and wipes her hands on her apron, smoothing the creases that will never disappear. She steps outside and stands with her head bowed, ready for judgment. You peek from behind the doorway. The steward walks like the road owes him something. His boots are clean, polished leather. His cloak is wool-lined with fur. He carries a thin ledger and scratches something into it with a long feather quill. He doesn't look at you. He doesn't look at your mother. He looks at the roof, the door frame, the bundles of firewood stacked against the wall. He tuts once, then moves on. He leaves behind silence and relief. Your mother slumps onto the bench and exhales deeply. Her hands tremble. You give the baby back and gently press a warm cloth to her forehead. She smiles at you weakly and mutters that it could have been worse. You nod. It could always be worse. The rest of the day stretches on like a held breath. You gather kindling for the next day. You stir the ashes in the hearth. You scrub your brother's tunic where the mud has stiffened into a crust. You help your sister pick burrs out of the baby's blanket. Every task bleeds into the next. There's no stopping. No sitting down for the sake of rest. You rest only when your hands have nothing left to hold. After supper, more stew now stretched with water and scraps. You lie by the fire and watch the shadows crawl across the ceiling. Your sister braids your hair absent-mindedly. She does it tighter than necessary, and you wince, but you don't ask her to stop. Her hands are warm. Her touch is the closest thing to comfort you'll have today. Your father doesn't come home until late. His boots thud heavy across the floor. He doesn't say anything, just eats the crust of bread left for him and falls into the straw with a grunt. He smells like sweat and wet leather. His fingers are bleeding. You don't ask why. You curl into yourself as the fire dies down. The air grows colder, and your thoughts scatter like dust in the light. You wonder what it would have been like to be born into a different life, a different time, a different place. To have your own room, a bed that doesn't crawl, food that doesn't run out, hands that don't bleed. But that wasn't your fate. You were born here, to this hut, to this soil, to this life of ash and labor, and there's no escaping it, only surviving it, one aching day at a time. You wake before the light breaks, not because someone calls you, but because your body has learned that morning is never a choice. It simply happens. Even while you sleep, your muscles know what comes next. You stretch in the dark, the cold biting your fingers and toes before your mind can catch up. Your sister is curled beside you, her breath warm on your shoulder. The baby stirs nearby. The fire has burned out again, of course it has. You pull the coarse blanket aside and rise slowly, trying not to wake the others. Your knees creak, your back aches. You're 12 years old, and already you walk like an old man. You wrap your shawl tight across your shoulders and step outside into the mist. The air is sharp with frost. Your breath comes out in clouds, and the mud beneath your feet crunches with a delicate layer of ice. Somewhere a rooster is crowing, but not yours. Yours stopped weeks ago, taken by a fox or sickness, or maybe just old age. You never found the body, just feathers. You head to the barn. The goat is restless, bleating for feed. She kicks the side of the pen as you approach. You stroke her neck, soothing her with quiet words you don't mean. You feed her what little fodder remains, dried hay, brittle and pale. She eats it anyway. Everything eats what it's given. Back inside, your mother is up, bouncing the baby and stoking the fire with hands that tremble from weariness. She hasn't slept properly in 3 nights. You take the baby from her without a word and rock her while she pours water into the pot and drops in the oats. You both move in rhythm now. Words are saved for when something breaks. The morning meal is hot, if nothing else. Thin porridge with shreds of cabbage from yesterday's stew. You eat slowly, knowing it needs to last. You save a few bites for your sister, who's still rubbing the sleep from her eyes. When you hand her the bowl, she gives you a small smile. It's one of the only things today that feels like warmth. Your father is late returning from the forest. He was supposed to bring back wood-green pine from the Lord's land. Illegal technically, but everyone does it. The forest is full of secrets and dangers, poachers, wolves, even rumors of ghosts. You don't believe all the stories, but they still keep you from going too deep. He returns near midday, dragging a bundle of branches across the mud. His face is pale, his lips chapped and cracked. His hands are bleeding splinters buried deep in the fingers. He drops the load beside the fire, grunts, and sits. Your mother hands him broth and begins picking the wood clean of ice and rot. You help her. You always do. This is how you pass the hours, mending, feeding, chopping, carrying. There is no work and rest, only motion and stillness. And even stillness has its own weight. When you sit, it's to patch a cloak. When you stand, it's to haul water. When you lie down, it's to keep someone else warm. Later, your neighbor stops by Ida, whose eldest son died of fever last autumn. She carries a bundle of wool and a desperate look in her eye. She asks if your mother can spin it into thread. Your mother agrees, but not before Ida promises a trade dried mushrooms and maybe a pair of old boots if her brother can spare them. Nothing is given freely. But still, you offer Ida a slice of bread, and for a moment, her eyes shine. You accompany her back across the village, past the chapel and the market square. The baker's stall is already shut, nothing left by afternoon. The blacksmith is hammering something that rings like bells, sharp and rhythmic. You pass the Lord's manor gates shut tight. You pause, staring through the slats. You've never been inside. You've never seen stone floors, the tapestries, the silver on the tables. But you've heard tales of roaring hearths and meat-heavy platters of silk bedsheets and feather pillows. You wonder if it's true. You wonder if it's even real. Back home, you help your mother with the spinning. She shows you how to twist the fibers, how to keep the spindle steady. Your hands are clumsy. The thread breaks twice. She sighs but doesn't scold. Again, she says softly, "You try again." The thread holds. That night, you prepare the fire while your sister combs out her hair. She has lice. So do you. Everyone does. You use vinegar and ashes, scrubbing her scalp until she winces. She thanks you with a whisper. You kiss her forehead and try not to think about how much worse it could be. Dinner is root stew, parsnips and turnips boiled until soft. There's no meat. The pig has to last until Easter. Your father eats first, then the children, then your mother, then you. By the time it reaches you, the stew is cold. Still you eat. Still you are grateful. Later, when the fire has burned low and your family lies tangled together beneath the threadbare blankets, you stare at the rafters. You count the knots in the wood. You listen to your sister's breath. You dream with your eyes open of bread with butter of a cloak, without holes of hands that don't shake. But even dreams are heavy now. You weren't meant to rise. You weren't meant to climb. You were born to stay where you are. Low to the ground. Invisible. Necessary. Forgotten. And yet somehow you carry the world. The snow begins to fall not long after the first frost melts away. It doesn't come with warning. There are no trumpets in the sky, no signs from God. Just a shift in the wind, the taste of cold iron on your tongue, and then soft as feathers, the flakes begin to drift. At first it feels like a blessing. The children laugh, chasing them with open palms, their red noses pointed skyward. Even you smile for a moment, watching your sister spin in a circle, her hair catching the flakes like little stars. But then the sky grows darker, and the wind turns sharper, and you remember what winter really means. You begin preparing immediately. You bring in the last of the rushes, stacking them high in the corner of the cottage. Your mother begins cutting strips of cloth to wrap around the children's feet. Your father checks the hinges on the shutters. The door gets barred from the inside with a thick branch you drag in from the woodpile. Everything slows down. Everything tightens. Winter is not a season. It is a siege. The first night the fire dies too early. You wake shivering, curled into yourself like a leaf. Your brother is next to you, teeth chattering in his sleep. The blanket is pulled up to your chin, but the cold presses through it like fingers. You rise, throw on your tunic, and kneel by the hearth, trying to coax life from the gray ash. You breathe gently, like you're whispering a secret. A flame stirs. You feed it sticks. It grows. There's no more wood near the fire, so you go outside barefoot to gather more. The snow is a thin crust, crunching underfoot. You move quickly, teeth clenched against the sting. Every second matters. Every degree of warmth is a fight. Back inside, your mother is already awake, swaddling the baby, her lips blue. You don't speak. She lights the lamp and pours the last of the milk into a small pot to warm. You break off a piece of the barley loaf, stale but edible, and chew it until your jaw aches. The days blur. Outside, the snow thickens. The paths vanish. The pigs stop eating. The hens stop laying. The goats shiver in their pens. You wrap them in old cloaks, whispering prayers to saints you barely remember. You rub your hands together until your knuckles split. The wind sneaks through every crack, and the walls creak as if trying to escape. Inside the cottage, life condenses into heat and hunger. You sit by the fire spinning wool for hours, your fingers stiff and fumbling. Your sister helps shell dried peas, humming a lullaby to herself. Your mother works silently over the pot, turning nothing into something turnips, onions, water. A stew that tastes of survival more than food. You eat it slowly, guarding each bite like treasure. Your father grows restless. He hates being still. He sharpens the same knife over and over until the blade shines thin as glass. Then he disappears for a few hours and returns with frozen firewood strapped to his back. His boots are soaked. His fingers are raw. He doesn't speak, but he's breathing. That's enough. One evening, the wind howls so loudly that the baby won't sleep. You hold her close to your chest, rocking back and forth, singing the only song you can remember. It's not really a lullaby, just something your grandmother used to hum. You don't know the words, but it seems to work. She quiets. Then your sister asks if winter ever ends. You pause. You want to say yes. Of course it does. That spring comes. That flowers bloom again, and the river thaws, and the earth becomes something soft and kind. But you've seen too many seasons to lie. So you say yes, but not soon. She nods, and that's enough. Later, your mother rubs garlic on your chest and wraps you in rags when your cough won't stop. She makes a tea with dried nettles and bitter root. It tastes like mud and burns your throat, but it's the only medicine you have. You drink it anyway. You always do. One morning, the snow is so heavy that the roof creaks beneath it. You all wake in panic, scrambling to shovel it off with pots and broken boards. Your father climbs onto the roof, yelling orders while the rest of you throw snow into the yard. The cold makes your eyes water. Your fingers go numb. But the roof doesn't collapse. Not today. You take that as a win. At night, you lie beside the fire, your sister pressed into your side, her breath warm against your collarbone. You stare into the flames, watching them flicker and dance. You wonder if they remember what it's like to be free, if they dream of burning bright in an open field instead of crouching low in a dark cottage. You think of warmth, of sunlight on bare skin, of walking barefoot in soft grass. And then the wind shrieks against the walls again. Tomorrow you'll haul wood. You'll boil the same soup. You'll cough and bleed and stitch and scrape, and you'll survive. Because being a medieval peasant isn't about living. It's about not dying. The wind is quieter this morning, but the cold is worse. You know this kind of silence. It doesn't mean peace. It means the frost has sunk deep into the soil, deep into the beams of the cottage, deep into your bones. The walls seem to groan under the pressure of the cold, and your breath hangs in the air, like smoke even with the fire still glowing in the hearth. Your fingers, when you stretch them, feel stiff and strange, like they belong to someone else, someone older. Your mother says you'll be helping at the bakehouse today. It's your first time being trusted to carry your family's dough across the village to bake it in the communal oven. It's not a real privilege. It's just that your father is too busy splitting wood, and your mother has the baby clinging to her hip like a second skin. Still, you pretend it's important. You wrap the rough cloth bundle carefully and balance it in your arms like something sacred. It is. It's 2 days' worth of flour stretched thin and shaped into flat, heavy loaves. If you drop them, if you lose them, if someone steals them, there's no replacing them. Outside, the snow is hard-packed and crunchy. Your feet slip once and your heart stops as the bundle wobbles. But you hold it steady. The smoke from the bakehouse is already rising in a low column curling against the pale morning sky. You walk faster, shoulders hunched, eyes on the road. The bakehouse is loud and crowded. Every family is here. Every family guarding their share of dough, watching closely as the oven master marks each loaf. He barely glances at you, just grunts and scratches a symbol into the dough with a wooden stick. It'll be baked in order, and you'll need to wait. You sit on a bench near the door, the heat from the great stone oven reaching your face like a gift from heaven. It's the warmest you've been in weeks. You close your eyes for a second and pretend you're somewhere else, somewhere where the heat is normal, not borrowed. Somewhere where bread rises every morning without fail. The woman beside you mutters something about the steward raising the grain tax again. You nod, though you're not sure what it means yet. Taxes are a word you know only through your father's clenched jaw and your mother's quiet weeping. You've seen what happens when people can't pay. You remember the day the reeve came and took the neighbor's goat. You remember the look on their faces more than the act itself. When your bread is done, it's darker than you hoped. The crust is cracked and it smells burnt. But it's still bread. You cradle the loaves in your arms like they're living things and head home. On the way, you pass children your age, gathering sticks, faces red and cracked from the cold. You pass an old man sitting in the snow beside a tree, motionless. You don't stop. You don't ask. No one does. At home, the cottage smells faintly of smoke and boiling broth. Your mother takes the bread, inspects it silently, then slices a piece for the children. You don't ask for any. Not yet. There are too many mouths and never enough slices. Your father returns just before dusk, his arms full of green logs, too wet to burn properly. He stacks them by the fire anyway, saying they'll dry overnight. His hands are shaking. He doesn't mention it. Neither do you. That evening you grind dried beans into meal with the mortar and pestle. Your sister sings softly as she spins wool nearby. Your mother wraps the baby tighter and nurses her while staring into the flames. There's no conversation, only the sounds of survival, grinding, spinning, nursing, breathing. The stew is thinner tonight. More water, less vegetable. A sliver of salted pork dropped in for flavor. You get 2 spoonfuls, then pass the bowl to your brother. He licks it clean, then looks up as if hoping more might appear. It doesn't. After the meal, your mother shows you how to patch the holes in your tunic. You're not good at it. Your stitches are uneven. But she lets you keep trying. When you finally get the needle to pull through without snagging, she nods. Better, she says. And in that word, there is more warmth than the fire has offered in days. Later, as you prepare to lie down, the roof creaks. You know that sound. It means snow has piled high again. Too high. You grab a broom and push against the thatch from the inside, knocking the buildup loose before it caves in. Your arms burn. Snow falls outside in heavy clumps. Your sister watches from the floor, eyes wide. You whisper to her, "It's all right, even though it might not be." She asks if spring is coming. You say yes. You don't say when. That night, the fire burns lower than usual. You lie on your side facing the wall, feeling the cold crawl in through the gaps in the boards. You pull the blanket higher, and your sister curls in beside you. She's trembling. You press your hand against her back, trying to pass what little warmth you have. And in the quiet, you think about what it means to be born this way. Not as a hero, not as a lord, not even as a name, Just a body in a field, a hand in the dirt, a mouth to feed. You're not part of a story. You're what stories forget. There's a funeral in the village today. You don't know the man well. He lived at the far edge of the commons, past the crumbling stone wall where the brambles grow thickest. Your father says his name was Toma, and that he used to be stronger than any ox. But strength fades, especially when the crops fail and the sickness sets in. He went quickly, they say. Fever one night, stillness by dawn. No priest came, no sacraments, just a wooden cart, some ropes, and a hole in the ground. You're not allowed to weep loudly. It's not the custom. Grief is a quiet thing for peasants. No room for theatrics when the dead are part of everyday life. You help carry firewood to the burial hill while your mother clutches your sister's hand and whispers a prayer. The body is wrapped in coarse linen, and the grave is shallow, dug with frozen fingers and dull spades. The reeve says a few words that don't mean much. Then the dirt comes heavy and final. You don't stay long. There's no food for mourners, no feast, no candlelight vigil. Just the wind and the crows and the shuffling of boots heading back toward the smoke of home fires. That afternoon, your father is quiet. He stares into the hearth and chews on a twig. Your mother tries to distract the little ones with a game guessing shapes in the smoke, but her voice is thin. The cottage feels smaller than ever, like the walls are leaning in. You sneak outside just to breathe. The cold stabs at your lungs, but the air feels cleaner out here. You walk past the well, past the blacksmith's hut, past the tree where the village posts notices you can't read. There's a goose feather stuck in the bark. You take it, turning it over in your hand, pretending it's a quill. You imagine what you'd write if you could. Maybe a letter to someone far away. Maybe a name for yourself. When you return, your sister is combing her hair with a bone pick. You sit beside her and help untangle the knots. She winces when you pull too hard. You mutter an apology. She leans against you anyway. You talk softly about the burial. She asks if she'll die like that. You don't know what to say. You want to tell her no, that her life will be long and warm and full of soft things. But you've seen too much. You know better. So you say not soon. She nods. Evening falls earlier now. The sun seems shy. The world is dim before you're even done hauling water. You nearly slip on the ice near the well, but catch yourself just in time. You laugh not because it's funny, but because if you don't, you might cry. Your knuckles are purple. Your lips are cracked. You carry the water inside, careful not to spill. Dinner is bread and broth again. Your father eats in silence. Your mother chews slowly, as if drawing the meal out will make it last longer. You eat yours quickly, scraping the bowl clean and licking the spoon. Hunger makes you shameless. Afterward, you help your mother clean the bowls. The cloth tears mid-scrub, and she sighs. You know what that sigh means. No money for linen, no rags to spare. You'll make do with what's left. Later, your brother brings out a wooden flute. He carved it himself months ago, using a knife so dull it took days. The music isn't sweet, but it's music. A few squeaky notes, a shaky rhythm. But it's something that isn't work, something that sounds like life. You lie down and listen, staring up at the rafters. The beams are coated in dust and cobwebs. A spider moves slowly across one, unbothered by your gaze. You envy it. No taxes, no hunger, just web and wind. Your sister hums along with the flute. Her voice is soft, almost like a whisper. You close your eyes, and in that moment you wonder what kind of world lies beyond the forest, beyond the manor house, beyond the fields that stretch further than you've ever walked. You imagine green hills, warm bread people who laugh easily and sleep soundly. You imagine a world where pain isn't inherited like a tunic, where names aren't forgotten before they're written. But the wind rattles the shutters and the fire pops, and your brother's flute squeaks off-key. And you remember, you were born here, to this village, to this time, to this life of calloused hands, frozen feet, and whispered prayers over shallow graves. There is no door that leads out, only days, and more days, and then fewer, and then none. Morning begins not with sunlight, but with coughing. Your mother is hunched over the fire trying to muffle the sound with the crook of her elbow. It's the kind of cough that scrapes up from the bones, deep rattling, full of old cold and too many damp nights. You pretend not to hear it. She pretends not to notice you pretending. Your father says she's just tired, that it's the smoke from the chimney or the air too thick with wet ash. But you can see it in her face, the gray around the eyes, the slack in her shoulders. You've seen this before in the neighbor's wife last winter, in the shepherd boy the year before that. But there's no doctor, no herbs beyond what's dried and useless, no money for remedies, just hope. And that always runs out before the food does. You give your sister her share of porridge without touching yours. You say you're not hungry. She believes you. She always believes you. Today is washing day. You carry baskets to the river, your arms aching before you even reach the bank. The snow has turned to slush, and the mud sucks at your boots like it wants to keep you forever. When you finally make it to the water, the cold slices your hands open like blades. You scrub the linen against the stones anyway, watching your knuckles turn red, then purple, then numb. The other women and girls are here too. They speak in murmurs. Their laughter is tired, brittle. One girl says her uncle's cow gave birth to a two-headed calf. Another swears the Lord's wife was seen in town wearing men's boots. You laugh along not because it's funny, but because it's something to do that isn't crying. Your hands are shaking when you carry the wet clothes home. They'll freeze stiff on the line, then thaw in the cottage where you hang them near the hearth. The air will smell of wet wool and wood smoke for days. Your mother is asleep on the bench when you return. The baby is fussing. Your sister's trying to rock her, but failing, her hands too small, her eyes wide with worry. You take the baby gently and hum that half-forgotten song again. It works. After a few minutes, the crying fades into hiccups, then into sleep. You lay her down in the cradle and cover her with the only blanket that isn't full of holes. Then you kneel beside your mother. She's breathing, but shallow. Her face is damp with sweat. You wipe it away with the hem of your sleeve. Her eyes flutter open for a second. She whispers your name. You don't answer. You just squeeze her hand. By dusk, the cottage is dark. The firewood is running low, and your father hasn't come back from the forest. Your sister lights a tallow candle, and the flame trembles like it's afraid of being seen. Dinner is silence. No one eats much. No one speaks. When your father finally returns, he's limping. He says nothing as he tosses a few damp logs onto the floor. You catch a glimpse of blood near his ankle, but you know better than to ask. He pulls off his boots, wraps himself in a cloak, and sits by the fire like a man already half buried. Your mother stirs once, then goes still again. You wrap her feet in old cloth and place a warm stone near her side. Your sister watches with wide, wet eyes. Will she die? She asks. You don't answer. You lie beside her that night, just to be close, your cheek pressed against the curve of her spine, listening for the rattle in her breath. You try to remember what her laugh sounded like, how her hands used to braid your hair, how she always sang while cooking even if there was nothing in the pot. You try to remember it all, because you know what morning might bring. You fall asleep to the sound of wind, and you dream of fields filled with poppies, of warm bread, of laughter that doesn't fade. And for once you let yourself believe it might be real, just for a while, because here in this life belief is all you have. The next morning your mother is still alive, but only just. Her breath comes in short, shallow bursts. Her skin is cold and slick. Her eyes don't open when you whisper her name. She doesn't stir when the baby cries. She doesn't flinch when your father wipes her forehead with a rag dipped in warm water. You don't speak of death, not aloud, but it hovers in the room like smoke creeping into every corner, curling beneath every silence. Your sister keeps glancing over from where she sits by the cradle. Her lips are pressed into a line so tight they've gone white. Outside, the sun hasn't risen, but the world is already moving. The rooster crows, the goats bleat for feed, and the wind scrapes across the shutters like fingernails. Life continues. You want to scream at it to stop, to wait. Just a little longer, but it won't. So you wrap your shawl tighter, pull on your boots, and head out to the byre. The goats haven't eaten since yesterday, and if you don't feed them soon, you'll lose their milk. You scrape together what hay you can find, most of it brown and brittle, and let them feed. One of them coughs. You pretend not to hear it. Back in the cottage, your father is preparing something bitter: onion skins, garlic, boiled nettles. It stinks. He forces a spoonful between your mother's lips. She doesn't swallow. It dribbles down her chin. Your sister starts crying. You don't stop her this time. You sit beside your mother holding her hand. It's small. So much smaller than you remember. How is it that the same hand that once lifted you from the dirt now feels like paper? You press your lips to her knuckles. You don't say goodbye. Not yet. Later, your father sends you to the village for help. He doesn't say what kind of help, just points toward the Reeves house with tired eyes. You bundle up, pull your hood low, and trudge through the snow. Every step feels wrong, like you're leaving something behind you can never come back to. At the Reeves, you explain what's happening. He nods grimly, says he'll send for the hedge woman. Not a healer. Not really. Just someone who knows which herbs help and which roots kill. She might come. If she has time. If she's sober. You trudge back through slush and wind, praying silently to every saint you can think of. To Mary. To Joseph. To a few whose names you're not even sure are real. By the time you return, the cottage smells of smoke and wet wool and silence. Your father's eyes meet yours. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. You know, she's gone. Your sister is curled in a ball near the hearth, rocking back and forth. The baby is quiet, too quiet. Your father is staring at the ceiling like he expects it to collapse. You kneel beside the body. She still looks like your mother, but not entirely. Something's missing. Something sacred and invisible. A warmth that even death steals. You cover her with a cloth and place her hands together, fingers interlaced. The same way she prayed every night before bed. You try to do it gently. You don't want to break her. There's no time for weeping. There's too much to do. Your father speaks, finally, voice hoarse. We'll bury her at dawn. You nod. The rest of the night is a blur. You don't sleep. You don't sit. You gather stones to mark the grave. You help dig. The ground is frozen. Your fingers go numb around the handle of the spade. You keep going anyway. By the time the sun rises, you've made a hole deep enough. You wrap her in linen, not clean, not new, but it's all you have. You carry her. Together you lower her into the ground. No priest, no blessing. Just the wind and your father's cracked voice muttering something too soft to hear. Your sister drops in a sprig of dried rosemary. You place a stone at her head, smooth and round. You kneel in the snow beside the grave long after the others go, and you whisper. Not prayers, not farewells, just stories. Little things she told you once about stars and dreams and the smell of bread baking on a summer morning. You whisper them like promises, like confessions, like hope, because you don't want the world to forget her. Even if no one else will remember her name, you will. You always will. In the days after your mother's death, time becomes thick and strange. Each hour stretches endlessly heavy with silence. The cottage feels emptier even though nothing has been taken. Her bowl still rests on the shelf. Her shawl still hangs from the peg by the door. Her comb still lies on the bench, tangled with a strand of hair you can't bring yourself to move. She's everywhere and nowhere. Grief is unfamiliar not because you've never lost someone, but because this loss feels different. It isn't a distant neighbor or an old man from down the path. It's your mother, the one who held your hand in the night, who stitched your clothes, who sang while stirring the pot even when there was nothing in it. You feel like something inside you has been scooped out and replaced with cold air. Your father doesn't speak much. He rises at dawn, tends to the animals, hauls water, repairs tools. But it's like he's underwater, slow, dull-eyed. You catch him standing at the hearth, sometimes staring at nothing, jaw clenched. Once you see him gripping the edge of the table so tightly, his knuckles turn white. But he never cries. You don't either. You've learned that grief has no room in a peasant's life. You bury the dead, and then you carry on. And there is so much to carry. Your mother's work has become yours. You're now the one who tends the fire, who prepares the pottage, who rocks the baby while mending the hem of a tunic. Your sister tries to help, but she's still small. She watches you with wide eyes as you stir the pot wrap. The infant gather herbs and boil water for cleaning. At night, she crawls into bed beside you and clings a little tighter than she used to. The baby cries more now. She doesn't understand what's missing, only that something has changed. You hum to her with a dry voice, bouncing her gently until her eyes flutter shut. Your arms ache. Your back aches. Your heart aches. One morning, the steward rides into the village again. This time, he isn't alone. He's flanked by 2 men in chainmail, and he speaks louder than usual, as if trying to remind everyone how small they are. He announces a new tax, something about a toll for using the river path. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to. He writes it into his book with a smirk, and the reeve nods like he agrees, though you know he hates it as much as anyone else. You ask your father how you'll pay. He doesn't answer. That evening, your father says you'll have to spin more wool, that you might need to sell something, maybe the goat, maybe the extra boots, maybe your mother's shawl. He doesn't say it gently. There's no room for softness now. You bite your tongue until it bleeds. You don't want to let go of any of it. Not yet. Later, you take the shawl from its peg. You run your fingers along the frayed edge, pressing it to your cheek. It still smells like her smoke and sweat and rosemary. You fold it carefully and place it in the bottom of the chest, away from your father's sight. You'll find another way. You wake early the next day and take the basket of spun wool into the next village. It's a long walk over icy roads and slush-filled ditches. Your feet are soaked before you're halfway there. But you keep going. You don't have a choice. At the market, the merchant eyes your wool picks at it, grunts. He offers too little. You barter. He laughs. You stand your ground. He raises his price by a single copper. You nod. It's not enough, but it's something. You use half of it to buy barley and onions. The rest you keep hidden in your bodice, praying no one robs you on the road home. You return after dark, exhausted, your fingers raw, your stomach hollow. Your father doesn't ask how it went. He just eats, and then sleeps. You sit by the fire, watching the embers collapse in slow motion. Your sister is snoring softly on the straw mat. The baby murmurs in her cradle. The cottage feels like a different place now. Not just quieter, but heavier, like the air is made of lead. You whisper to the fire, asking your mother what to do next. The flames don't answer. But you do, you get up. You gather the wool. You keep spinning. You mend the tunic. You grind the barley. You prepare the pot. You rock the baby. Because you weren't born to be seen. You were born to bear, to carry what others drop, to survive what others won't. And even though your name won't be carved in stone or sung in any song, you know this. Your hands hold a world no one else sees, and they hold it still. The snow is melting now, not in great dramatic waves, but slowly, softly. The icicles drip in rhythm from the eaves, and the mud is starting to reclaim the paths between cottages. The air still bites, but it no longer sinks its teeth in so deep. You wake to the sound of water trickling down the slope behind the house. The world is beginning to breathe again, but you're too tired to notice. Spring should feel like hope. That's what everyone says. But for you, it feels like just another kind of struggle. A different rhythm of work. A new set of chores. You don't feel lighter. You don't feel saved. You feel like someone poured cold water into your bones and told you to keep walking. There's so much to do. The fields have to be cleared, the tools mended, the soil turned and coaxed back to life. Your father is out at first light, hacking at the clumps of snow-crusted dirt with a hoe so worn the blade shivers with every strike. You follow behind, Guillaume, gathering stones and roots, your boots sinking deep into the muck. The wet earth sucks at your ankles, clinging to your steps like it's trying to pull you under. Your sister helps plant early onions in a narrow strip beside the fence. She hums as she works hands brown with mud. You want to tell her she's too young for this, that children shouldn't have to shoulder so much. But you don't. Because you were younger than her when you started. And no one said it to you either. That evening, a neighbor stops by. It's Marta, whose son died in the last bad winter. She's thin as a reed now, wrapped in a patched cloak, her cheeks hollow. She carries a basket of eggs, 3 no more. A gift, she says, for helping bury her husband the month before. You don't argue. You just thank her and tuck them carefully into a corner of the hearth, where it's warm enough to keep them from freezing. She lingers by the fire, rubbing her hands together. She asks how your father is holding up. You shrug. She doesn't ask about your mother. Everyone already knows. You offer her a crust of bread, and she accepts it like it's a feast. For a few minutes, it feels like something close to peace. The crackle of the fire, the shared silence, the gentle clink of the wooden cup as she sips water. Sometimes survival sounds like this, not breathing hard, not weeping, not running, just sitting, just being. After she leaves, you boil the eggs and split them between your father, your sister, and the baby. You don't take one for yourself. You tell them you ate while out in the field. No one questions it. No one ever does. Later that night, you sew a patch into the sleeve of your tunic. The thread is too bright, it doesn't match the faded gray of the cloth. But it holds. That's what matters. Your stitches are getting straighter, your hands faster. Your mother would be proud. You think about her every day. Not in grand, dramatic moments, but in small ones. When you crack the ice in the wash basin. When you braid your sister's hair. When you season the soup with salt saved from the bottom of the barrel. She's there. In your hands. In your choices. In the quiet. The next morning, your father brings home a rabbit. A scrawny thing, more bone than meat, but still it's food. You skin it, while your sister watches with wide eyes. She asks if she can help. You hesitate, then hand her the knife. She flinches on the first slice, but finishes the job. You say nothing, but later you give her the liver. The best part. She doesn't realize it. That's fine. You make stew that night. Thick and rich. The smell fills the cottage, even creeping into the folds of the blankets. For once, everyone eats until their bellies are full. For once, no one scrapes the bottom of the bowl in disappointment. Afterward, your father speaks. He says the planting will begin in earnest tomorrow. That the Lord's steward will be counting heads again, measuring what's owed, tallying the hours worked on the domain. There will be little time for rest. You nod. You already knew. The cottage sleeps soundly that night. Even you. And in the dark you dream. Not of castles or fine things, but of green fields, of clean hands, of a world where hunger doesn't follow you like a shadow. And though you know morning will be hard again, back-bent hands, blistered stomach, knotted with worry, you allow yourself this one softness. Because sometimes to survive you need to believe in the possibility. Something more. Even if that belief is as fragile as an eggshell. Even if it cracks by dawn. Spring gathers momentum like a cart rolling downhill, slow at first, then all at once. The mud dries into dust and the air grows warmer. The smell of decay fades, replaced by the sharp green scent of new growth. Buds appear on the trees. The chickens begin laying again. And people start talking. Louder, brighter, as if daring the world not to fall apart again. But you're cautious. You've seen how quickly hope spoils. How a sunny morning can turn to storm by noon. Still, you can't help but feel the tug of something beneath your ribs when you walk barefoot through the damp grass for the first time since last year. The earth feels soft again. It feels like something that might forgive you if you ask nicely. The fields come first. You rise at dawn and carry seed in a rough sack across your shoulder. Your father digs shallow furrows, and you follow behind, scattering barley with care. Not too much, not too little. Every handful must count. Your sister chases crows from the field with a rattle made of old bones and string. She shrieks and waves her arms, her laughter loud and unexpected. It's the first time you've heard her laugh since your mother died. You plant until your fingers blister. You plant until your back screams. You plant with the understanding that even if the rains come right, and the sun doesn't scorch, and the pests stay away, the harvest still won't be enough to fill every stomach. But it's what you have. It's what you do. The next day you work on the Lord's land. It's not yours, though. You walk it as often as your own. It stretches wide with hedges trimmed and fences mended, not like the common fields patchy and overrun. You labor there under the steward's gaze, under the threat of punishment. You weed rows of vegetables that you'll never taste. You repair fencing for animals you'll never touch. You scrub the flagstones by the kitchens where roast meat drips fat you can smell, but never lick from your fingers. And still you bow your head, because not bowing means worse. Back home you boil nettles again. The rabbit's long gone. The bread's stale. But your sister dances by the fire with her rattle, pretending it's a tambourine. The baby babbles. Your father even hums a few notes of an old song. The moment is light, like a bubble caught on a breeze. Then comes news from the church. A feast day is approaching, one of the few times of the year where joy is allowed. The villagers will gather. There will be music and bread, and sometimes a miracle meat. You start mending your best tunic, patching over the knees and elbows with scraps you've saved all winter. Your sister asks if she can wear your mother's old apron. You nod. She beams. The feast day arrives with clear skies and warm wind. The whole village gathers in the square. Children chase each other between baskets of herbs and loaves of bread stacked high on wooden boards. A fiddler plays a crooked tune and the women clap along. Even the reeve smiles barely. You eat slowly, letting the warm bread linger on your tongue. You dance shy at first, but then with more joy than you've felt in months. Your sister twirls her hair, catching the sunlight. Your father laughs aloud, full-throated and raw. It sounds like thunder. It sounds like resurrection. And for a few hours you remember what it's like to be more than hungry, more than tired. You remember what it's like to feel. That night back in the cottage, you light a candle in your mother's bowl. It flickers gently. You don't cry. Not really, but you sit beside it for a long time. Because she should have seen this day. Because you're afraid of the next. Because joy always feels like a borrowed thing in your world, something loaned by fate waiting to be reclaimed. The next morning the fields are quiet again. You return to your chores. The bread is gone. The music fades. But something small remains. A warmth that wasn't there before. Not hope exactly, but something like it. A sense that maybe, just maybe, survival isn't the only thing you're allowed. That even in a life built of labor and loss, there might be room for moments that mean more than just getting through the day. You gather your tools. You tie your hair. You step into the light. The days grow longer. Not by much, just minutes, then a little more. But you notice. The light stays golden well past supper. The birds return first in pairs, then in flocks. The grass thickens. Wildflowers creep along the fence posts, brave and stubborn. And for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, the air smells not of smoke and sickness, but of something green, something alive. You wake with the sun and stretch your arms wide as though claiming the day before it slips through your fingers. Your sister is already at the stream washing rags. The baby teeters after her, wobbly-legged but determined. You call after them, your voice cutting through the morning like birdsong. They laugh. And it doesn't feel borrowed this time. It feels real. Work doesn't stop, of course. It never will. There's barley to weed peas, to train along stakes, fences, to mend firewood, to gather while the weather still holds. Your hands are rougher than ever. Your back aches before the sun hits its highest point. But your limbs move with purpose. You've learned how to carry 3 jugs instead of 2, how to cut a branch without dulling the blade, how to walk barefoot without flinching. You've become the shape your life required. You've become what it takes. And the village sees you now. They nod when you pass. They hand you an extra turnip at market. They ask after your sister. Even the reeve seems to glance away when you speak, as if afraid of offending someone who has endured more than he has. There's a whisper among the older women that you'll make a fine wife one day, that a strong woman is a rare gift and some young man will be lucky. You say nothing. Because what can you say that you've already married the land, that your vows were whispered with every seed you planted, every fever you wiped away, every hunger you swallowed down? Still a part of you wonders. Not about love, not really, but about rest. About lying beside someone who understands the weight of your days, who won't expect you to smile when the fire burns low or the sky splits open with storm. Who'll let you weep in the night without turning away? You don't say it out loud, but you wonder. And then you keep going, because the harvest will come soon. And if the rains don't ruin it, and the rats don't find the storehouse, and the Lord doesn't raise the tithe again, you might have enough to make it through next winter. And if you don't, you'll survive that too, because that's what you do. You survive. Not because you're brave, not because you're blessed, but because you must. Because you were born in the wrong place, in the wrong time, with the wrong name, but you learned how to make it matter anyway. You were born a peasant, a girl, a burden, some might say. But you've become more than they ever imagined. You've buried the dead and fed the living. You've fought hunger with your bare hands and kept children warm with rags and whispers. You've scrubbed floors, mended wounds, planted hope. No one wrote your name in the history books. No one carved it into stone. But if they did, they'd write, "She endured." And maybe that would be enough. Because the truth is, this world wasn't made for you. But you lived in it anyway. And you lived well. And you loved fiercely. And you did not let the darkness win. Not completely. Not ever. You reach for your shawl, slinging it over your shoulder like a knight preparing for battle. There is still work to do, but there is also still you. And that is something. That is everything. So now, as the cottage falls quiet once more, and the fire dims to soft amber glow, you breathe slower. The weight of the day gently slips from your shoulders. No more hauling, no more patching, no more gathering stones from frozen fields or wiping fever from your mother's brow. Just this moment. Just rest. Listen to the wind brushing the thatch above, to the steady breath of your sleeping sister, to the faint crackle of the hearth as it settles into stillness. The world is hushed now, and you're part of that hush. No demands, no expectations. Just the peace that arrives when there's nothing left to carry, when you've done what needed doing. And somehow, despite everything, you're still here. You feel the earth beneath your straw mat, solid and ancient. You think of the seeds buried deep in the thawing soil, silent, unseen, but waiting. Always waiting. Like you, like hope. You pull the wool blanket up to your chin and let your eyes close, not in defeat, but in something quieter, something softer. You made it through another day. And in your world, that means everything. So sleep now, just like the fields sleep. Your story, though quiet, is not forgotten. Because every heartbeat, every breath, every whispered song in the dark, it mattered. It always mattered. And it still does. Good night.